or you will end up on the operating table.
Oh my gosh! What a threat!
No, but I think that's fair.
What advice would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs?
You just use the MUM test. It end up meaning that someone can't get their surgery at the end of the day. And it's not the staff's fault. If you just decide one day that, I don't really feel like doing much, then like from one day to another, the company literally is like done. Oh, he's nuts. And many people will say that, that's not gonna work.
It feels very crazy.
Every single day this week.
So today on the Nova and Boba podcast, we have Max, who was named in Forbes 25 under 25. He's a co-founder of VitVio, which recently raised $2 million to make operating rooms safer and more efficient using computer vision and AI. How we usually start the podcast is like a little bit of analysis on the type of person I think you are based on your bubble tea order.
Oh, right, of course, yeah.
Yeah, so I've been having some thoughts on maybe the type of entrepreneur you are, and I've come up with some things. So
Let's do it.
tell us what you ordered.
So it's lychee bubble tea with those lovely little balls that I have no idea what you call them, but
Popping balls.
popping balls, yeah.
It might not be true. Take it with a pinch of salt. You can feel free to correct me, but it told me you were like open-minded, adventurous, someone who likes to take risks and doesn't go for sort of the standard maybe mango or brown sugar milk tea. Lychee was quite a unique choice. So it gave me adventurous, it gave me cultured, it gave me someone who wants to do something different.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that's exactly what it means. Fully aligned with that. I like that more than like zodiac signs or tarot. I think that's what I'm going to use actually.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So anytime you meet someone, be like, what's your bubble tea order?
Yeah.
And I'll tell you about yourself. So yeah, in your own words, what is VitVio?
So VitVio is a startup that aims to help improve efficiency of the operating rooms in the hospital. So what we do is we go into an operating room, we install cameras in the ceiling, everything's fully anonymized, we don't need to see who exactly is in the room doing what, but we can detect the stage of the surgery automatically and then trigger events around the block. And that's what we start with. There's of course way more that you can do when you have those cameras in place, things like preventing tool waste, because again, at the moment, very manual process. If you look at hospitals around the world, whether that's in London or best hospitals in the US or a hospital in Singapore, what they have, the technology they use to track what tools are being used is barcode scanning. But what barcode scanning tells you is what tools go into the operating room and not what tools actually end up being used. Yeah. So then what we do, and again, it's a very manual process. You have to scan every single thing that you bring in. So what we do, again, we have the camera looking at the tools and you automatically get the feedback on how you can minimize the waste. Now, maybe I'll use an example here. So I was actually scrubbed in to a surgery a few months ago, and it was a hysterectomy. So basically, yeah. So essentially, we were scrubbed in, we were watching the surgery, and everything was going fine until the last part of the surgery, where the staff realized that they've left a gauze inside the patients, and that happens. That's that happens. That's why you have the tool count during the surgery. But what ended up happening was that the nurse, that was meant to alert for the next patient, had to go in and check where the gauze was in the patient, and then they found the gauze. Everything was fine. There was a suture event in the surgery, but what they didn't do is they didn't alert for the next patient because it has to be done manually. So then what ended up happening was an hour delay, which then caused the last case of the day to be cancelled. So things like that. Delay, and then end up meaning that someone can't get their surgery at the end of the day. And it's not the staff's fault. It's the fault of the system that they have in place and kind of the lack of technology that's actually helping them. Like I was speaking to a head of surgery at a large US hospital recently, and he said, he agreed for me to steal the quote, by the way, but he said that we as staff serve the technology.
There's a couple of things I want to dig into. So could you go back to the gauze thing? Because I didn't quite understand, like the nurse, what do you mean she had to alert the next?
So then what she did is she had to go and find the gauze within the patient, which is perfectly normal. That's what she should do. She should focus on the patient, right?
She was finding it within the patient's body.
Yeah, essentially. Or looking it around the room, because you don't know if it's in the body or in the room. But then what she was meant to do was within the EHR, the system that they have in the hospital electronic health record, note down the event of skin closing, and which happened directly after they found the gauze. And that event then would go to the operating room coordinator.
What's skin closing?
Skin closing is when you suture a wound, like you literally just close the wound.
So at suturing the wound, then she had to
So then, as you suture the wound, you would usually call for the next patient because you wanna optimize things a bit. So as you're closing one patient, then the nurse in another part of the hospital will be preparing the patient for the next surgery. So that's the part that didn't happen because she had to take care of the patient, which is what she should be doing in the first place. So then what we do is we try, take all those things that happen manually and just do them autonomously. There is one statistic that is just like crazy. Per 1 hour of patient time, like face-to-face, doctor-patient, there's 2 hours of EHR time. So basically doctors sitting in front of their screens and just logging data. I mean, it shouldn't be like that.
It shouldn't be like that. So you described it a really interesting way for me, which is using Amazon Fresh. So I wondered if you could give that analogy.
Absolutely. So I think we're kind of uniquely positioned to actually deliver on the technology because all of our team comes from autonomous retail background. So combined, we have deployed 150 plus autonomous stores. Wow. So that's your Amazon Fresh. There is like an autonomous Aldi in Greenwich if you're in London here, and there is like a bunch. Actually, Poland is a big place for autonomous stores for some reason, which is where I'm from. But essentially, what we do is we take some of those learnings from that industry and bring the proven technology into healthcare. So our clients can actually go in to an autonomous store and see how the technology we've deployed works already. Yeah. And it's a very similar use case here. And in some ways it's actually even simpler because if you think about an autonomous store, think of the day before Christmas. Yeah. That's your worst case scenario. You have hundreds of people coming into the store trying to get the last gifts. So that's when your servers get overloaded. You have to account for all of that when you design the servers where you have your GPUs and stuff. That costs money, so you have to over-index. So that's one thing. Another thing, think of all the products that you have in an autonomous store. There's like tens of thousands of them, and you have those like tiny packets of gum that you have to detect from the cameras as people grab them, right?
It's crazy.
So now think of an operating room. In an operating room, whether that's in, again, London, US, Shanghai, they will follow a very similar process. Mostly they will also follow the same WH standards, but even without them, you still have to bring the patient into the operating room. You still have to put them under the anesthetic, then you have to carry out the surgery and roll them out. So wherever you are, and also, second thing, the tools. Wherever you are, you use basically the same tools. You have the same companies mostly. So all of that means that we have a quite standardized process that we can follow, and also a set of tools that's
That's what I was just about to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just so amazing that they say that's where innovation happens, like a technology in one space, like moving to another space. Because people go into Amazon Fresh. What makes you think I'm going to use this for surgery? Like, it feels very crazy.
It does, but I think this is where, as you said, this is where innovation happens. And just a bit about our team. Most of us we obviously have clinical people on board now. David, who's an orthopedic surgeon, and a few other people.
He's an orthopedic surgeon on you.
Yeah.
So I guess he knows about.
Yeah. But most of us came from outside of healthcare, which actually we thought was very helpful because we can come into a hospital with a fresh pair of eyes and we can see where the inefficiencies are, what can be done that is perhaps done elsewhere, i.e. autonomous retail or several other industries that we have experience in, and just apply it to a hospital. And I think there is one issue with hospitals. Hospitals have been burned by the promises of different technologies that are gonna people promise them the world and then nothing really happened. And I think a lot of it comes down to just like all of those tools just keep adding steps to the processes.
Yeah, and you don't want to add more, right? You're already burnt out.
One of the first things we've heard when we went into this was one of the surgeons said, "Do not add an extra step
do not
to
even
anything happening in the OR, or you will end up on the operating table."
Oh my gosh! What a threat!
No, but I think that's fair. I think that's fair. We take it seriously. That's like one of our key.
It's not like in your office.
Basically, if we had an office.
Yeah, if we had an office.
Because we're remote first, but we will have an office and it will be there. But so basically going back, all of the tools that people have developed for the hospitals, they keep adding those steps. And we come in and we say, guys, we're going to subtract most of these steps and do things for you, trying to flip that technology and staff relationship on its head.
How did you know this could be applied to surgical rooms? Because you came from a mechanical engineering background. I just don't get, like, were you just looking at different industries to apply this and were like, surgery might be a good one?
We didn't know it could be applied to operating rooms. But we actually... we went into this, so it was just me and my two other founders. Now there was 4 of us in total, but and then the team is much bigger than that. But we basically went into this because of a kind of personal tragedy that my co-founder had. So his father passed away very, very unexpectedly, and then. He was speaking to the coroner or to one of the doctors that was treating his dad before his death. And then he learned that it essentially could be prevented. So if you were tracking all the vitals of his dad's, then you would see that his heart was basically making itself a bypass. And the pressure was steadily rising over like a period of 2 weeks before this. So we talked about it and we thought of all the things, of all the worst, and we then thought how many people are dying every year because of something that's preventable. So that's where we started. It was kind of sparked by this. And then, the idea, long story short, I think Apple or Google can do something like that. I mean, they're of course working on things like that already. It's very difficult for a startup with limited funding to kind of tackle that and to get it right. Just one thing is like very limited access to raw data, so you can't really train your ML models. I'm not going to go into this, but what it allowed us to do, and that's why I'm also like a very big advocate of just going, if you want to set up a company, you don't have to have the perfect idea. Because
it's changing. Yeah.
I think you have to have an idea just so that you can use that as an excuse to talk to people. And you probably should pick, the right industry, because you're probably going to be speaking to the people in the industry. So those are like 2 things that I would say are important. But you don't have to have the perfect idea. I mean, what this allowed us to do was to speak to so many people, hundreds of people in the hospitals, doctors, budget and productivity managers, like everyone. And that's when we started learning about the real problems. So that was honestly, worth gold for us. And you just have an excuse
to keep talking to people.
Yeah, to keep talking to people because you have an idea, and it might not be the best one, but what's really important here, and that's maybe one book recommendation I would give.
Oh, let's get it. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. You just use the mom test when you talk to people.
Oh, the mom test. Yeah, that's.
I mean, it's honestly without the mom test, we wouldn't have the idea that we have today. Basically, and. I think some people have the ability to talk to people. I think the mom test is a good kind of way to just organize that. So yeah, that was insanely useful.
That's brilliant. So we're going to delve into the first 0 to 6 months. So you were just talking to people, finding the different problems, like informing your idea.
I mean, the first 6 months, it was. Most of us still had jobs. I was the first one that just went full-time with it.
Did you quit your job, or was that from uni?
So it was quite fortuitous because I was working in the European Commission for a bit, and then my contract ended, and I could either find a job. I was thinking of moving to London and getting a job either in healthcare or in actually energy and climate related things, because what I worked in Brussels in the European Commission on was climate policy. But then basically, with my co-founders, we just decided to go for it. And we agreed, it was very clear, I'm going to go full time with it. I'm going to spend most time on just like trying to push the idea forward. Then Alex, my co-founder, soon after that moved full-time as well, and we just basically risked it. And that was all based on the first idea that we had that now we know is not a great one.
Yeah.
So, but it worked out. And then the first 6 months, I mean, I think you should just like speak to as many people as you can. That's basically what we tried doing. And then we spent some time on developing like very low fidelity prototypes of the product. That was helpful also in learning from people. But it was very scrappy. It's basically the company moves as quickly as the amount of time you put in, or like amount of clever ways you can find to like hack the system in. But it really is really interesting, like seeing that the company literally, like if you just decide one day that I don't really feel like doing much, then like from one day to another the company literally is like done. So that's actually it was a really interesting thing to experience. And then as the company grows a bit and you raise the first round, it becomes like real and honestly great. Like I wouldn't swap it for any other job.
So how did you and your co-founder decide to take the risk?
We had this conversation a few times, and I think for most of it, I think one of my co-founders said it best, because he was working in autonomous retail for a while, and he did like a bunch of very cool things in his career. But then at the end of the day, we essentially all agree that like when we're on our deathbed, is this something that you're going to look back to and be proud of? And I think with some people I did, with some things I did in the past, that's definitely the case. But guys have been working in retail and on some other things, and maybe they haven't necessarily felt that way. So we just basically went for it just for our own mental health, for our future self's sake, I guess.
To know you did something that you thought would change.
Yeah, I think that's basically what most of us want to do in the end of the day, right? So it wasn't a difficult decision, also because we were lucky enough to not have like massive responsibilities in terms of we're not carers. We didn't desperately need big money just yet. And then soon after we set up the company, the wife of my co-founder got pregnant, which was
oh no, wait, that's not no.
No, it's great. His name is Ollie. He's 7 weeks old, so he's a cutie. So he's gonna grow together in the company.
The new co-founder.
He's our intern. He already got.
He's an intern. Do you know what? He needs to get that experience early, because these days.
Absolutely.
That's really, really great. So you, from 0 to 6 months, when did you realize you needed to start fundraising? Because you normally say quite nonchalantly, like, we raised 2 million. I don't even think you said the number, but like going from this idea that just started with you, your founder, to then being like, this is something that's going to have millions behind it, a couple million.
So we were able to sustain ourselves for a while.
What were you using? Is that mine? But we like to ask that question just so people know what to do.
So like personal savings. Not all of us went full time from the beginning. So like the company expenses, whatever that would be, would just be covered by those salaries. So we had our savings, at least like some of it, and some of us didn't quit our jobs. We waited with that just to be able to have that runway, because it will also just be dumb for all of us to quit to do something that we were not sure about. So I think it was once we hit the idea with the operating rooms, we just knew that we have to raise, that we have to go full time with it ASAP, and we have to raise the money. So there was a period, and I respect my co-founder so much for it. He was working just like 2 full-time jobs, and by full-time jobs I mean just like probably more than full-time. For
2 full-time jobs.
Yeah, for a while, just to sustain the company. So that's basically what it took to get to where we are.
He's a
today.
real one. How long was he working? Like what hours was he doing?
Oh, he's nuts. Thomas is great.
Shout out Thomas.
Shout out Thomas. He was working crazy hours, and it definitely took like a lot of understanding from his wife as well, and you have to have that support to be able to do that. So I think all of those little factors contributed to us being able to actually do it. And then we decided to raise. It took a while to raise, but we're super lucky with the investors. We honestly couldn't have turned out better.
And how did you go about raising funds? Like, Take us through some of the step-by-steps. Like imagine I want to start a company. What would you tell me to do to start raising money?
Right. So I don't have it cracked yet. I mean, it was just our first round. But definitely warm intros is a big one. Like that's very, very important. And we basically, when we were starting out, I wouldn't say that we had a crazy network. I mean, we had a network that you would have if you worked in tech, but not in startups for a while. So like we knew people who then turned out to new people, basically, to know people. And I could point to like maybe 4 or 5 people that were, the absolute stars that connected us to like really, really, people with networks and then investors. Then it was also interesting because, like some of that was also cold outreach from the investors to us on LinkedIn. And many people will say that, yeah, that's not going to work. But actually for us, it was like really helpful because then, and what I did, by the way, is I just put, I'm working on a stealth startup. And then people just started reaching out to me.
Did you reach out to them saying you're working on stuff startup, or you put that on LinkedIn?
No, I just put that on LinkedIn. And honestly, like investors these days, they have like a lot of them just automated, and they have a scraping tool, I think, running over LinkedIn and seeing like who has started working on something new just by like seeing who's working on a stealth startup.
So, why did you do it in stealth? Sorry, I don't want to digress too much.
Because, especially with the first idea, I think there are a few reasons. But we wanted to just try it out first. And I think unless, also in terms of, just like competition and giving away too much, I think unless actually shouting about what you're doing helps you in any way, I just wouldn't.
Yeah, and sorry, what were your other tips apart from warm intros for raising funds? Because that's a really good tip. Did you know about warm intros before? Like, I didn't know people were just introing to each other all the time. Like,
yeah, I mean, I guess I didn't know that it had such a big, that it mattered so much, right? Because it is like crazy. All of the cold outreach I did when we were raising just didn't work, like at all. Like it would just, I don't know, like you have some forms on some VC's websites. It just like don't bother, honestly. Like at least for me, it didn't work. Maybe someone raised using that at some point in the past, but
for you,
that didn't work. So then another thing actually that was quite surprising was that when we were speaking to investors, the way we actually found our lead investor, who's not a famous investor, but is like very high commitment, low volume, and like helps loads with all of our problems. Basically, the way we found him was we were speaking to this VC in Europe, and then they essentially, I don't remember exactly like the order of things, but essentially it's something they passed on us. But they were like, but we know this other VC that might be interested. So we got an intro from a VC that then passed on us, but then that intro turned out to, be the intro that got us the round closed.
Wow.
So, because I also read that like, oh yeah, don't ask VCs for an interest because if then they pass, that's a bad indicator. Well, it wasn't in our case. And I don't know, there was just like so many tips online, and I feel like there is always an exception to the rule almost. So I also take that with a pinch of salt, but I don't know. It took us like months to raise. I could go for hours, but
someone just said the same thing you did. Someone passed on them. They introduced them to someone else. The other person said yes. When the other person said yes, they then came back saying they wanted to also invest again. They had changed their mind.
Yeah. No, I mean, it happens. Yeah.
So really, really crazy. So how do you have a very atypical co-founder team? There's 4 of you.
Yeah.
How do you make that work? Apparently that's like a no.
Yeah. Oh, that's it. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we heard so many times that 2 or 3. In our case, it works amazingly well. And I think the testament to that is also how quickly we can move. Because whoever we speak to in healthcare is usually surprised by the amount of time that has passed since we've raised, and then the amount of things that we've done. Especially in healthcare. The amount of things you have to do in terms of compliance, in terms of hospital sales cycles, which just take a while and a lot of time that you actually need to put in, and a few other things essentially mean that for us having 4 co-founders was insanely helpful. And what that also allows us to do, so think about fundraising, right? So if we fundraise, so there's me, I'm COO, there's Thomas, CEO, Alex, who's the Chief Product Officer, and then we have Peter, who's the CTO. So when me and Thomas, the CEO, would go and raise, the product and engineering can still move full steam ahead, right?
Because,
so that's one thing. The other thing is that with our product being reliant on deployments, and we have to install the hardware, we have to server, cameras, all that. That also takes a lot of prep and a lot of time. So if it was just say CEO and CTO, then not much development would happen on the machine learning side if you had to fully focus on developments, which we will have to be fully focused at basically for a while now, because we have several deployments lined up for the next few months. And that's where basically I come in, for example, and help Peter, the CTO, a bit, just so that things can still move ahead on all fronts. So, I mean, in our case, it works like a dream. And I think we, any investors that we've spoken to that were maybe asking about this now see that for us it works.
It works, yeah.
I also appreciate that sometimes it's too many cooks. And I think it also depends on the relationship that you have with the other co-founders, and maybe just the type of people you are. I think we are very, very well aligned in terms of the values, the way we, the kind of people we are. It's quite supplementary. I don't know. It just works for us, but I wouldn't say that's that everyone should go for it. I think it's just this specific case.
And I would love to dig into the day-to-day, because a lot of people don't know, what do entrepreneurs even do on a day-to-day basis? So what does your day look like? Maybe not today.
Well, I mean,
come on, Bubble Tea Podcast.
Yeah, it's a Saturday, but every single day this week has been completely different. So it's very, very difficult to give a
set sort of,
a set sort of things that you would do in any given day. And I think that's also one of the things that I really like. There is a lot of context switching that is just sometimes it's just I had my co-founder call me this week, because we're with Thomas, we're speaking a lot during the day, and then he finished the call and he called me and I'm like, hey Thomas, what's up? And he's like, actually I don't know.
He completely lost his
because at this point you've done probably it's the 16th thing that you did that day, and the 5th context switch in the past hour.
His brain is just no.
Yeah, but so there are times like that. There are also obviously deep dives that you do and you spend 2 days on something, things like compliance, grant applications, things that take a bit more patience and time, let's say, let's put it mildly, and then
I've heard horror stories about compliance. I've got a friend building this data thing for hospitals, and she just spends her time reading compliant.
Yeah. I mean, it's, at the end of the day, it's about protecting patient data and making sure that things don't go wrong. So,
understand it.
It's needed, and it can obviously be a bit much if you have several frameworks that you have to go through. There is a bit of repetitive work, so maybe that's the part that's a bit annoying sometimes, let's say. But still, it's very important. We're actually in the hospitals, in the operating room, so I fully get it. But this being said, it doesn't mean it's fun. But then, I mean, sorry, there is not a simple answer.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
But yeah, there
maybe
is
even a couple of examples that you.
It's a mix of things. So you have managing all the relationships, I would say, is a big one in my case, because you have all the clients, you have the investors that you have to keep updated.
You're quite a people person, it feels.
Yeah, and I actually really like it. So that's another nice thing that I actually like about working with hospitals, because it's a very relationship-driven customer, let's say. So in our case, it's a lot of relationship management, as much as I don't like the word in terms of relationships. It's actually genuinely working with...
It feels like a...
I don't know, depersonifying the... Yeah. But no, genuinely just working with people, making sure that you're providing what they need. Then, in terms of other things, I mean, if we're fundraising...
Do you mind if I go back a bit? What tips do you have on building good relationships with clients, anyone in this sort of B2B or sort of space?
I think this one is just very... I think it's very simple and difficult human thing. I don't think it's
something you can teach.
I think it is something you can teach, but I don't know if I could definitely give you a set of things that you can follow. I think it's genuinely a lot of it comes back maybe to how you were maybe brought up. It makes things simpler as well, right? If you were like brought up in a certain way. But then, of course, even if you weren't, there's like things you can learn. But in terms of managing relationships, again, I don't like that phrase, but in terms of relationships, I think
everyone you know is on a manager schedule. No,
I think it's like you just have to invest the time to build a relationship. I mean, there's no going around. You can't have your LLM ride with a person as just the same way as you wouldn't have an LLM ride with your friend. I mean, that's exactly the same thing, right? So I think genuinely time is the biggest thing. You just have to put the time in.
There's just no shortcut.
I genuinely don't think there's a shortcut. And then, I think at the end of the day, it's also about like little things, just like showing appreciation if someone's helping you out of their goodwill. I just always try and like give something back, whether that's something physical or just like help them in some way. I think generally being like more of a giver than taker is a good approach. And in my life, that really has paid off in a multitude of ways. So yeah, I think that's like just...
Yeah, it always pays dividends when you give, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so the next section of the podcast is called The Reality. So we're going to spill a bit of the tea on...
I'll take my tea.
Yeah, so you'll sip your tea whilst we spill the tea. Have there been any sacrifices you've had to make to run this business?
Well, maybe there's also, like not having as much family time that I would like these days. But I think it's just, the way I'm thinking about it is just like a period. Yeah, I think this would be like the biggest sacrifice generally. But then it generally like, I've worked jobs where I would like clock out at 5:30 p.m. and was I happier? No, but definitely not. So at the end of the day, whatever sacrifices I make, they, it pays back like just like crazy. So.
And my next question is, who inspires you, Max?
Are in my family. Like for example, one of my uncles, sadly he passed away like a few years ago, but he was an architect, and every single discussion, he was a bit like a grandfather to me in a way. And every conversation I had with him was just like exhilarating. It was like so interesting. He was like 90, I don't know, 3, 4 at the time, or like 89 when I like had like those conversations with him. And it was just incredible, the curiosity he had towards like anything in the world. And he even set up, so you have, I don't know what they're called in English exactly, but like this university that gathers, third age university maybe, I don't know, that's what it's called in Poland anyway, but like those kind of groups of people that gather themselves in like a university and then learn about things. So in Poland it was called third age university, but he thought he was like too old for that, so he set up fourth age university, and then just basically was learning about things. So I think that's the person that maybe inspired me the most in terms of like having the curiosity about like a multitude of things. Not just, the tech world and like what Sam Altman did yesterday, but also like there are so many other interesting things in the world. Like I love architecture, design, reading about history and this kind of stuff. So yeah, I think that was mine.
He's obviously re-inspired you because you seem to have got a lot of different things from different industries to build your company now. So like that curiosity is really...
Yeah. And I think the most interesting things happen at the intersections of industries. I very strongly believe that.
My final question for you is, what advice would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs?
I would say honestly, just do it. Like if you're in a position in life where you can do it and like there is nothing stopping you financially, of course you could make more money, but if there is nothing stopping you financially, or like your family situation, I think there is no better way to, actually test it and see if you like it other than actually doing it, giving it a go. I mean, I think, we're the best example that we started with an idea that's very different, still within the same industry, but very different than what we're working on now. But we wouldn't have got there if we haven't actually, made the move, ditched our, well-paid jobs that were like very stable and just like went for it. So that's my very simple advice, just go for it.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Max. You've been an amazing person to have on the podcast. I've loved having you. So yeah, thank you for all your insights.
Thank you for having me, Emma. Thanks so much.